Hey everyone, today we are talking about the Cleric Class and how to play it in the solo Goblin Caves. I hope I can show you a unique perspective of the class and the caves since I have leveled every class in Dark and Darker to level 20 and spent a considerable amount of time in both the normal dungeons. First, I want to talk about the basics that pertain to each class. If you've seen another one of my class glides, you've probably heard all this before. First off, if you haven't escaped a raid yet and have no money to spend, your goal in your first raid is to make as much money as you can so that you can buy and bring in healing items in your next raid and find some upgrades for your equipment, maybe backups for later. What will help you more than anything else when trying to survive a dungeon is avoiding damage from monsters. Seems obvious, right? But not so simple. Let's talk about kiting and strafing. Monsters have simple AI to dictate how they will attack you. Once they're aware of you, they will approach you until they're in range to attack, then they'll attack. With range mobs like archers and casters, they'll stop about 10 feet away and start shooting right at you. They do not lead their shots, but the Goblin Shaman's spell will actually track you around corners. And if you only have access to melee attacks, your best bet is to strafe about 3 to 5 feet away, wait for their attack to miss, and then go in for just one attack. Then back off about to the 5-foot distance again and strafe again to dodge the next attack. The Skeletal Archer has a multi-attack that he uses intermittently, which you need to look out for. For melee enemies, they'll just approach until they're about touching you, and then they swing. It's recommended not to use a shield to block the attack, and just dodge the attack by walking out of the attack range. The most effective strategy is to bump into them to get them to attack and step back and dodge, and then while they're still following through, you can go and make an easy attack or two. The Skeletal Soldier has an attack combo that can go up to 3 attacks in a row. It's generally recommended to avoid the soldier until you're a little bit more prepared. Let's talk about looting. If you don't have a comfortable amount of money to always buy healing items for a raid, then you should prioritize getting valuables like gold, gems, bracelets, rings, goblets, and gold. All the stuff you can trade with the collector to get cash. Next, prioritize getting items that you can use in other raids, like weapons, potions, bandages, and armor. These items take up more space in your inventory, and if you sell them, they're worth much less than if you had filled them with valuables. Lastly, look for tradables. Tradables are rare or powerful items that your class can't use, but someone may be willing to pay for it through the Traders Guild. Whether something is worth selling to another player or not is complicated, but generally some blue tier items are good to sell, and most purple items and up are worth taking. Now, let's say you've had some success, and you've got a few hundred gold pieces in your stash. What do you do with that extra cash? Well, first off, make sure you have a small stock of healing items. After that, you can start considering buying better weapons or new pieces of armor. Your weapons are often class dependent, but we can talk about them in general terms. Most monsters have either 100, 150, or 200 health. And knowing this, we can kind of theorize that a weapon with 22 damage will kill him like 5 hits, 7 hits, 10 hits respectively, counting for no headshots, blah, blah, blah. Look, here's a chart with the numbers. These are damage thresholds to look out for to help reduce the number of hits to kill. It seems like higher is always better, and that is really true, but don't waste your money if it doesn't help your time to kill. Your stats and enchantments can affect your damage too. Strength above 15 gives additional physical power, and below 15 you start losing it. Armor is actually more complicated and opinionated than the weapons. First off, your armor rating directly affects the damage reduction percentage non-linearly. At 0 armor rating, you actually take 10% more damage, and if you add 10 points, you get to 0%. But if you add 10 more, you don't get to 10% damage reduction, you get to like 5%. And if you add 20 more, you only get to like 12. Here's another chart explaining the curve. The simple rule is always grab boots and gloves if they're better than your current ones. For helms, shirts, and pants, it's almost not worth wearing them because they reduce your movement speed and they might let you live for one more hit. They're worth wearing if you can find equipment with good enchantment though, so look out for those. Actually, what are good enchantments? Well, it does vary for each class, but some are generally good for all classes. Plus to all stats, plus damage reduction, plus to damage, physical and magic, plus to movement speed. That's what you're looking for. That's not all the good enchantments for each class, but that's pretty much what everyone desires. Finally, let's talk about the cleric specific stuff. First, before you enter the dungeon, you need to pick your skills and perks. Perks are passive effects that give you class specific bonuses. At level 1, you can only choose one perk, but at 5th, 10th, and 15th level, you can pick an extra for a maximum total of 4 passive perks. Which perk should you pick for the Goblin Caves? Some perks are better for playing with the party, so I recommend taking different perks for the solo caves. And the first perk I recommend is for you to grab Protection from Evil. This reduces the duration of harmful effects by 50%. This is useful in the Goblin Caves more than the regular dungeon because goblins have poisoned attacks that linger for extra damage. In some situations, the poison will do more damage than the hit dealt initially, and cutting this damage in half will keep you healthy and survive a couple more hits, actually. There are other options as well. Advanced Healer for its plus 5 healing is a good alternative because not all damage comes from goblin poison. Another option to pick once you have the extra slots is Perseverance, which reduces all types of incoming damage by 3, which helps against both the initial damage from a hit and again from the poison. For your 4th slot at 15th level, I recommend Blunt Weapon Mastery for the extra 5% attack power. Extra damage is always nice, but it's just better than the other options available, like Undead Slaying, which gives a 20% bonus damage to undead creatures, which goblins are not. Skills are pretty simple. You must take one of the spell memory skills to use spells, which we'll talk about next. Your other options are all pretty good for different situations. Judgment is good to start a fight with another player, but useless against monsters. It deals 35 damage to a target player and slows them for 2 seconds. Smite deals an additional plus 10 magic damage to all enemies you hit within 10 seconds, and it has a short cooldown of only 16 seconds. Holy Purification is more useful in the dungeon because it inflicts 100 base magical damage to all undead monsters within a 7.5 meter radius, but it's got a long cooldown with 45 seconds before you can use it again, but completely useless against the goblins. Now I won't go over every spell, just the ones I recommend for the Goblin Caves. First off, always take Lesser Heal. It's the easiest and quickest way to heal yourself. Just don't cast it on your opponent in battle, unless they're undead, and then it'll deal some damage. Next, I recommend Protection, a spell that gives you or your target a 20 hit point shield for 20 seconds. It can be used before a fight to give you extra health, or during the fight if you're already out of Lesser Heals. Divine Strike works like the Smite perk. You, or whoever you target, will deal an extra plus 10 magical damage on each hit for the next 20 seconds. Next, I recommend Holy Light. It's a spell with 2 different effects if you cast it on living or the undead. It heals an ally for 30 hit points, or it'll do 100 base magical damage to an undead target. And although you can't heal yourself with it, it does deal 100 base damage to undead. And there are a few skeletons in the map in the center that it can be used on, mainly the Skeletal Champion, although don't cast it on his shield because it'll get absorbed and deal no damage. Try the legs. The last spell I recommend is Bless, which gives a plus 3 to all attributes, which gives you a little bit extra health, a little bit extra damage, and some extra movement speed. This one you can switch out with another that you like because casting 3 different buff spells on yourself isn't always possible before a fight. You only have a set amount of uses for each of your spells, and the only way a cleric can regain them in the dungeon is with a campfire, which takes almost a whole minute to place and use. It's better to plan for yourself that you won't regain any spells, and you need to use them sparingly. Let's talk about your starting gear. The cleric starts with a mace and buckler, as well as your spellcasting staff. Never use your magic staff for melee and try to replace it with a spellbook as soon as possible. A spellbook offers more movement speed, and the extra magic damage adds to your Divine Strike damage buff. Your mace is not a bad starting weapon, but the buckler is. It's very hard to block attacks with a small buckler, so look around for round shields or heater shields to replace it. Although your mace isn't bad compared to the other starting weapons, it still has downsides. The mace will only deal its full damage if you hit with its head. If you hit with a shaft or pommel, it's significantly reduced. The Morning Star is a higher damage and wider swinging weapon than the mace, good for solo play, and the quarterstaff is a fast and powerful two-handed weapon that makes kiting mobs easier. Both of these weapons are better than your starting weapon, but all three of the weapons you can use pretty viably for combat, so just pick your favorite one or the highest damage one you can find. Armor is a more complicated discussion. For now, as long as you have at least 15 armor rating, usually just with boots and gloves, it's not very helpful to wear your starting pants and robe because they reduce your movement speed. Adding more armor past this point has diminishing returns and often won't make a difference in number of hits it takes to kill you. So if you can reach 120 armor, it becomes worth wearing because your damage reduction reaches about 20%, and then the armor helps you survive extra hits, but otherwise it seems better to dodge and kite attacks with the extra movement speed than it is to equip your chest and pants. Wearing helmets is almost always recommended because of the headshot damage reduction. It'll still slow you down, but you're stacking extra reduction on top of your normal armor, which still might only save you from one extra hit, but it could also save you from the one-shot kill. Plate armor is the easiest way to get enough armor to make a difference, but slows you down a lot and can be kind of hard to find. Higher tier equipment with enchantments can help as well, but those are harder to find. There may be some changes to how this works in the future, but until then, this is what we're dealing with. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, let's talk about our strategy for the Goblin Caves. So, you're a new character on their first run of the caves. Obviously, we want to get loot and get out. Getting out means finding an exit, and getting loot means fighting monsters, mostly goblins. When you spawn in, you're likely near some goblins already, and fighting them will give you an area to loot. We don't have a ranged weapon, so we want to aggro each monster by walking into their aggro range and pulling them away from others so we don't end up in a fight with multiples. If we do end up fighting multiple, we can sometimes block the other one with the one we're fighting. If not, we have to kite both at the same time or use terrain to block. Keep in mind that archers also can shoot over the goblin warriors and they'll still hit you. Shaman can kind of do this as well, but more because their attack tries to follow you around corners and stuff. Getting comfortable beating the goblins can really take a while, and they have some extra AI options that allow them to kind of retreat and sometimes taunt. And this can mess up our timing, but it can also give you additional opportunities to deal more damage. Once we've cleared out our starting room and looted it, we can start moving to the next zone. We might have already been pushed by the zone towards the center of the map. Clearing a room of goblins takes a lot of time, and if the zone is in a bad place, it'll push you to your next room before you're finished. Some rooms are large enough that we can avoid some goblins and just hit main loot spots, so you don't need to take the time to clear the whole room. And there are other distractions to keep you from looting efficiently. Players can bother you as well. Sometimes they want to attack you outright, other times they just want to survive like you. Players who want to fight will move toward you aggressively and need to prep your spells and buffs before they get to you. If they hear you buffing, they may back off and not push you, but they might just be trying to wait out the buffs because they only last generally 20 seconds. It's on you to push now, so just don't fall into any traps. Rangers can set them, and rogues can go stealth as well. A player may not want to fight, however, and generally, if they don't want to fight, they'll spam crouch at you. If you reciprocate this dance of friendship, it doesn't mean that you two are friends forever. You're just agreeing to a ceasefire for a short while. The dungeon only has 5 escapes, which means that 11 players that enter won't all make it out. Players are also opportunistic. If they see that you're vulnerable, they may kill you just because it's easy. I recommend you be opportunistic too. If you are kind to another player, they're not obligated to be kind to you. Don't let anyone close if you can avoid it. Keep your distance, and once you part ways, the next time you see them, you could be as enemies. Now back to looting. The best loot in the Goblin Caves is in the center rooms. The caves are tiered, and the center room has about 3 floors. The top floor has skeletons and spiders spread throughout the long, snaking hallway. The middle floor has a more open room with more skeletons, beetles, and some traps. There's a skeletal soldier here guarding the main loot area in the pool of water, and he's a tough fight for many classes, but the Cleric has Holy Light to attack him at ranged. Just don't cast it on his shield because it will absorb the spell and deal no damage. You'll have to finish him with melee, and kiting his combo is a little tricky, so avoid him if you can until you're a bit more confident kiting mobs. Doors can be used to block them following, but be careful since they can break them down if you're standing too close. The bottom floor has the troll boss, and also the best loot. We're not going to talk about how to kill the troll boss because I haven't killed the troll boss yet. Now, the final few zones will push you closer to the remaining players, if there are any left. Players who have survived to this stage are either weak from all the fighting or strong because they know how to handle the caves well. If most players have died and only a few are left, you may want to make a truce with the other players here if there are enough portals for you all to share. You and the other players are likely already all full of loot, and even if you kill another person, you can't take all of theirs because you're full yourself. If there aren't enough portals for everyone, or you can't find them, you are probably going to be forced to fight. Remember, the dungeon has multiple floors. You might need to run through the swarm to get to a different level where a portal is. You won't survive every time, and likely not even half the time. And that's okay. Just use the money you make from surviving to get some healing for future runs. Once you have a good stockpile, you can start thinking about buying those weapons and armor from the traders. I recommend you hold off doing that until you have about 200 gold, so you've got enough to buy healing items if you have a string of bad luck. And if you have a string of good luck, you'll likely find extra weapons and pieces of equipment that you can save for later runs. Don't go overboard. You don't need 10 round shields taking up extra space in your stash, but if you run out of space, that's a good thing. That means you're winning more than losing, and that's the goal. If you can survive more than 50% of your runs, you'll have all the money you want. That's all we got for today. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I hope this was a unique learning experience from other guides out there. We have some more guides for other classes coming soon, and I hope you can enjoy them too.